Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's December 1st, 2020. I'm John Swinimer. If you have a comment, criticism, or question, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Jack Briglio, Mike Heneghan, Derek Künsken, and Josh Stafford about Flip Volume 2. The podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. And don't forget to check out the new YouTube channel. Jack is a writer of the Eisner-nominated fantasy adventure series Growing Up Enchanted, published by Marcosia in 2010 and 2011. Previously, Jack also worked on Scooby-Doo and Legion of Superheroes in the 31st Century for DC Comics. For IDW, The Adventures of Digger and Friends, Sesame Street Comics for Sesame Street Workshop, and Scarlet, Riverdale's autistic teen for Archie Comics. Jack has a graphic novel Thunderboom for Kids Can Press, Dominion Jack with Hugh Rookwood, Dominic Bercier, and Ron Salas, a serial in Joe Shuster nominated Canadian superhero anthology series True Patriot Presents at Chapter House Publishing, Take Two, a crime fantasy serial for Comic Scene, award-winning digital anthology magazine Aces Weekly, and he's editor and contributor to the speculative fiction anthology Real World What If called Flip, and the second volume is what we're talking about today for Marcosia Publishing. Mike previously resided in Toronto but now lives in Ireland. He's an award-winning writer who's worked with people like Disney, Sci-Fi, RTE, and Rai. He graduated from IADT's National Film School in Dublin with the award for academic excellence for his thesis Groundhog Day as a Nietzschean Text, and is currently writing with Romero Games on their upcoming crime strategy game Empire of Sin, while developing work in various media. Derek writes science fiction, fantasy, and sometimes accidentally horror. He writes both novel-length and short fiction with a preference for works that explore really strange places and people. He's had science fiction stories published in Asimov, Clock's World, and Analog magazines. Josh is a co-owner and resident geek-in-chief of Ottawa's historic Mayfair Theatre, one of the oldest-running single-screen cinemas left not only in Canada, but on the planet. He graduated from Canterbury Arts High School and Vancouver Film School. Amongst other projects, he directed a short film which screened at San Diego Comic-Con and co-produced a roller derby documentary for CBC. More recently, his writing efforts produced Flash Forward Flashback for DC Superhero Girls. Comic writing credits include 3 issues of Zombies along with Flip, Volumes 1 and 2. So, without further ado, here's my chat with Jack Briglio, Mike Heneghan, Derek Künsken, and Josh Stafford about Flip Volume 2.
Thank you, everyone, for joining me this evening. I appreciate you talking about Flip Volume 2, so thank you for your time. Maybe to get things started, you could each just do a brief introduction, and then we'll get started with the questions.
Hi, it's Jack Briglio. I'm the editor and also contributor to Flip. I have written comics for over a lot of years. Let me count 30 some years probably now. And thinking back of my first books for Aircell way back in the day in the late 80s. So yeah, a long time. Over the years, I've written for DC Comics, IDW, and I've done creator-owned books like Growing Up Enchanted, a fantasy adventure called Growing Up Enchanted, which was nominated for an Eisner. That also was released through Marcosia, which publishes Flip, which we're talking about tonight. So, working on a bunch of different projects, and Flip Volume 2 is the latest, and looking forward to talking about it.
This is Mike Heneghan. I'm Mike Heneghan. I'm an Irish writer. I used to live in Toronto, just kind of in a roundabout way how I wound up, writing in Volume 2 of Flip. I write in different media. I studied film and TV in the National Film School in Dublin. I'm currently writing on Romero Games' upcoming game Empire of Sin, and I write comics as well. I wrote Zomben, co-created Zomben with Titan One Studios in Toronto. I have on and off run some webcomics with some Canadian artists, and I wrote the story Buddy Carr in the current volume of Flip with American artist David Brame. Right now I'm working on developing some of my own comics besides. I'm working on writing some feature films, and I'm working on writing some TV series and animated projects as well. I've worked for Disney, Sci-Fi, I've worked with the Irish channel RTE, I've worked with Rai, I'm kind of like looking at the about section of my website right now and trying to condense it really quickly and really fast. Also, it's 1:10 in the morning here in Dublin. So if I'm a little addled as I speak, that's because I was asleep until 15 minutes ago. But I'm in now and I'm locked in. So that's me.
Thank you, Mike, for joining us. I appreciate you joining late.
No worries.
I can go next. This is Derek. My name is Derek Künsken. I'm a prose writer for the last 15 years. A lot of magazine publications, and now I'm also a science fiction novelist with my third novel out and my fourth one coming out next year. And incidentally, on Dublin, I was in Dublin during the summer for the Worldcon. It was great.
Oh, cool. I want to jump. I'm trying to figure out the format. I want to jump in and say, "Oh, cool," and then kind of trigger a conversation from there. But I feel we've got to get through everybody first before I do that.
That's all good. Hey, Josh, you talk a little bit about yourself here.
I have a short story in Flip called Red Giant. It's kind of a sci-fi apocalyptic kind of thing. I know Jack through just kind of comic book con land first, I guess, and we're both kind of in the Ottawa, Ontario area. Another project I have that's just being solicited now is called Damn Cursed Children through Source Point Press, and it's a 5-issue miniseries that'll have its first issue coming out in January. And I co-own and co-run a movie theater called the Mayfair Theater. That's sadly one of the last remaining single-screen theaters left anywhere, and we're hanging in there. Opened in 1932 and still screening films. Yeah, kind of writer part-time and run a movie theater part-time and have a few other projects like that on the go, and excited to be a part of Flip. It's a really great anthology.
Well, thank you all for joining. Really appreciate your discussion here. So I'll open this up to anyone. Maybe someone would like to put forward the notion of how you would describe Flip, especially Volume 2, to someone in general you might meet.
I can give it a try. The way Jack described it to me when he was first pitching Flip 1 was that you're basically flipping one thing in the world, and then you're taking a look at the implications of the of what stories and what world can happen when you flip just one thing. And I thought that was a really cool idea.
So I presume that this project came about because of the success of Volume 1. I mean, Jack, would you say that's a true statement?
Yeah, Volume 1 did very well. For Marcosia, I was very pleased with the numbers, and we had a blast doing the first one. I originally talked with the publisher to want to do 2 volumes, but after the first one, it did really well. And the first volume is a little bit smaller than this volume, and it enabled me to kind of build connections and bring more stories in. Derek, for example, actually, he had a story in the first volume, and I invited him to pitch and contribute to the second. So yeah, I mean, to add to what Derek was saying, I've always been a fan of anthologies and of shows like Twilight Zone or even currently Black Mirror on Netflix, those kind of shows. And on the comic side, and on DC and Marvel side, Elseworlds and What Ifs were always the neatest thing for me. So wanting to do real world short stories really appealed to me, because those were always on the more, especially the DC and Marvel ones, all focused on, superheroes in those universes. I kind of wanted to take it from the angle of, like Derek said, taking something and say, what if one thing was changed? Let's tell a story around it and see what's different and what do we learn from it. So we've had a lot of fun with it.
Now, you just mentioned that Derek and you've been on it, Volume 1, but how do you gather all these creators from such a eclectic background to join for an anthology? How do you reach out to them, and how did you find these people to work on this particular one?
So I think what a lot of people do with anthologies is they may do an outward call to bring people in. I mean, for this one, I have such a big network of folks that I know from whether in comics or outside of comics, and all had same interest in doing short stories, that I kind of went out to certain folks and just talked to them and said, hey, would you be interested in doing this and contributing to it? So it may be that some anthologies do end up being that way, where people are putting an anthology together with some sort of theme, and they gather around like-minded folks and try to put their a really nice collection together. And that's what I tried to do. I contributed this to a couple of the stories as well, but I wanted to bring some variety and diversity. And so, that's why, there are some people who have done comics, but also others who, like Derek, who loves comics, but is a prose writer and an excellent prose writer at that, bringing him in to do something that he loves, comics, and try it out. I totally welcomed that, and he did an excellent job. And same thing with Mike, who is on the film animation side of things, also love for comics. I just wanted to bring some different voices from different media to see what we could all do together, and I'm really happy with the result.
Yeah, congratulations on getting it all done. That's tremendous. So I'd like to do is ask each of you about what your contribution was for this particular volume. So maybe, Josh, you could go first.
I wrote a short story called Red Giant. It came about just, I believe, when Jack and I were at a Comic-Con together a while back, and he just asked if I had any ideas for an anthology. And I love what if stuff, as has been just mentioned, What If and Elseworlds and stuff like that. I love movies like Run Lola Run and even Sliding Doors, a bit more mainstream, but just that simple thought of one small or enormous thing changes everything. And so for my little short story, the first page shows, I guess, kind of the opposite universe and the real terrible thing, and then the flip, and then it plays out the opposite. And so you get to see kind of the two opposite worlds. Jack found me an artist, a real great artist named Paolo Monte, and I think came together really well. And what's fun is I've worked in film a bit and stuff like that, and then you really have a budget. You really have, you can't do everything. But with this, I got to do spaceships and the apocalypse and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, with a great artist, you can pull off these stories that would be millions of dollars otherwise. So that's a lot of fun.
Sounds great. Mike, how about you? What was your contribution?
Well, my story the story I wrote was a story called Buddy Car. I did it with an artist named David Brame, an American artist who's great, who I met when I lived in Toronto and who I've worked with a little bit over there and stayed in touch with. I got in touch with Jack through another friend, and we got chatting, and he mentioned he was editing this anthology, and I asked him could I pitch some ideas on it, because I love the sound of it also. Like, I love I used to love like the Outer Limits growing up, and like the What If, all the same stuff, like the What Ifs, the anthologies, all that stuff is really, really in my wheelhouse. And I had a story, or I heard a story through a friend of mine who he used to work for a company that basically, I guess it was like the early noughties, they would get phone calls from people, and they'd leave a message, and an algorithm would transcribe whatever message they had left into text for them, like warts and all. There actually was no algorithm for the company. It was just a bunch of people in rooms just like transcribing frantically whatever was left on voicemails, but masquerading as an AI. And I thought there was a story in there, and then kind of worked a story out from there, and had quite a different story, I guess, in mind from the start. But then once I kind of I guess we all are in this gig economy that we're in now, and becoming more and more isolated as times go by. And I guess maybe kind of, I don't want to say I was president, but or I don't even want to say that word out loud because I don't pronounce it correctly, with the COVID situation and the self-isolation and working remotely, but basically created a scenario where somebody was masquerading as the AI for a self-driving car because the AI doesn't actually work. And that was the story I told. Took it from there.
Ah, very intriguing. Derek, how about you? What was your contribution?
I wrote a story called Frankenpuppy. The flip is that basically the world is overrun by Frankenstein monsters and humans are just, a small minority. I'd been toying with, just trying to learn a little more about horror and stuff, and reading a lot of old horror comics. And this seemed like a fun way to do that and play. But I mean, any good horror is going to get into not just the monster scares, but I mean, this one took a look at what parenthood is like, and what relationships are like, and what inherited culture of religion is like, because you've got Franken dad who's got to make a Franken puppy for his Franken daughter. And so it was fun to do. And the artist I paired up with is Trevor Marquardt from Vancouver. He's brilliant, and his art, like when you look at it, you can see he's so channeling, the 1960s, 1970s, 1950s movie monster horror. And so it just worked so well.
Cool. Now, Jack, you've touched on your contribution. I wonder if you'd talk a little bit more about what you did specifically for Volume 2.
Well, Volume 2, I contributed a few stories to Volume 2. One is Monkey Business with Hugh Rookwood. Hugh, I worked with before in the past, actually with a story in Volume 1 that we did, and also for Dominion Jack. He's who I'm currently working with on telling Canadian superhero stories of Dominion Jack. And Monkey Business is the flip there is it's a flip on aging. So you're born old and you age young. So it's that Benjamin Button kind of idea. And I played that out chronicling the lives of 3 Italian friends from old age to childhood. So it's almost like a coming of de-age story about fatherhood and friendship amongst fatherhoods amongst that. So it's also a story that's dedicated to my father, because one of the characters is loosely based on my dad and his experiences, and he passed away last year after a battle with dementia. So a story that means a lot to me, and a story that I think Hugh just blew it out of the park. And he played with a few different styles as the story progressed, because it started with a little more photorealistic style, then it went into a more standard comic book style, and then a little more cartoony by the end. So really proud of that one. And did a couple of other stories as well. One is a zombie story called Dying Alive that I did with Miguel Jorge, a Portuguese artist who I've worked with in the past as well. His art style is perfect for a zombie story. And this is a hopeful zombie story. So flipping the adage that it's usually a human world that's being taken over by zombies. This is the other way around, a zombie world. So fun little story there. And then added a short little story that I worked with Devin Taylor, a Canadian artist, ultra talented. Love his work. We did a short little story called Next, which is basically about people wanting the next big thing and what lengths people will go to get the next big thing. And I'm talking device-wise. So it's a little play on the whole Apple craze and, needing to get that next device or whatever the case may be. So that one's a humorous short that we had a lot of fun with.
Great. Now, Mike, I know you touched on this subject just briefly, but I wanted to talk to everyone about this, perhaps a need for people to use comic books as an escape from today's reality that we're focused in. I wonder if each of you want to comment on that, as Flip might be a reaction or maybe an escape, let's say, for people who are trying to get away from the reality of what we're going through.
Yeah, just chewing on it. What comes to mind for some reason is, my flatmate just got a VR headset in the last couple of days, so we live in kind of a small shared space here. So I've been watching the 2 people I live with. While I'm at work at my kitchen table with my laptop open, as far as the world is concerned, it's just me looking into the video screen, and they're looking back at me. But behind my screen, there's there's guys fighting Darth Vader or falling off cliffs or whatever, and that sound is coming towards me, and I can watch them react to it or behind me. So I suppose there is some kind of need for escape or gratification, but again, that's a VR headset. In terms of comics, I don't know, I guess we look to fiction to contextualize our lives, and I guess stories are a great tool to trigger emotion. I always feel like I reach for a story when I want to, feel an appropriate feeling for what I'm experiencing. So in that regard, or feel a different feeling to what I'm experiencing. So in that regard, I definitely would reach for comics.
I'll hop in. This is Derek. I mean, I think one of the things, we've all been looking at a lot is, not only the public health situation, but just the world situation, the political situation where, a lot of decisions, that are being made around the world, we're obviously questioning. Sometimes there's, your friends are in places where, bad decisions are being made, and it feels like just getting onto social media, which is sort of a place where you go to encounter your friends, becomes doom scrolling. Speaking for myself, I mean, at the end of the day, when I'm just in bed, I'll pull up some digital comics and, just immerse myself in someplace else. And it's like a wash away because, when you're looking at that, you're not, clicking on different things or following links or seeing what the latest outrage is. And I think it just kind of helps cleanse the brain for a little while. And comics are a big, big part of that because they're so like great art, great color, great layouts. I mean, it moves you. So sure. I think comics is a great escape.
How about you, Josh?
I know, especially now, it seems that people really like nostalgia for the best. I know at the cinema, we've been lucky to be back for a little bit after lockdown number 2 here in Ottawa. And it's just that simplicity of watching something that brings you joy. And comic books, I mean, most people working comic books are doing it because they read comic books when they were a kid. I don't think there's very many people who have stumbled into comic books blindly that have never read comics before and just work in the medium. I'm sure there's a couple, but not a lot. So yeah, both behind the scenes and people reading them, it's definitely a comfort. And nowadays, I find for myself, I'm emotional normally. I will, if it's Kermit the Frog singing a song, I'm crying at it. And I noticed lately, just anything really cool and really just something you can look forward to. The last episode of Mandalorian, I won't spoil in case anybody hasn't seen it yet and is a super fan, but stuff happened in it that just brought me such joy. And it was just, so I think in comic books, no matter the genre, I think, yeah, it's something you can, for most people, it's something they've been fans of for a long time and go back to frequently for that daily reading comfort or something to turn their brain off from the normal world. So yeah, I don't think that's anything that's changed during these horrible times or even at kind of the best of times. So yeah, comics are eternal for me, that's for sure.
What are you saying, Jack?
Yeah, I think everybody touched on the entertainment and escape factor of being in a place we love because we either grew up reading comics or we just enjoy the medium so much. You can also escape reality reading comics, but also learn about reality in the or take something from it in the same way. Because I'm just thinking of Flip, right? And what our stories are about. Our stories are real world stories that are just slightly changed. And the neat thing is that change, but in the essence of all of these stories, it's still about real emotions and real situations where we could look back and we can look and compare and say, how does this reflect society, or how, would things be better with this Flip, or is it really the same, or is it worse? Those kind of questions. So it kind of allows for a more deep look that, yes, glossed over. It's reading a story, you get entertained by the plot or the general push of the story, but it also, I find it's also neat to make connections, right? To make connections from the stories that you read and say, okay, this is commentary on this or that, or you could, now, not to say that it would necessarily was the it was the angle that the creators may have taken, but you read, you put yourself into something when you read it, right? So I find it always interesting to see what readers come back with whenever they read something in comics, and I'm sure we all have excellent examples of reading stuff that we've read that are classics, and we all glean different things. There might be something overarching that's obviously the theme or whatever of the story, but you also get something that maybe hits personally on your experience, right? So, so that might be the escape. That might be the opposite of what you're asking, John, in terms of escape from reality. I still consider it an escape because you're in a safer zone because you're reading a story at the end of the day and it's entertaining you. But I think it's also enriching you and maybe making you learn a little bit more, not just about yourself, but others, right? So.
Makes sense. Absolutely. So before we finish with Flip, I'm going to ask you one more question, Jack, about it. And will there be a volume 3?
Hopefully the volume 2 does really well, and so far so good. I think I've heard some early returns from Marcosia, and things are looking good order wise. But the original the original discussion where we agreed on was 2 volumes. I'd love to do a 3rd volume. It just might not be right away because Second volume took a bit of time, and I've got a number of projects that I'm working on in the next little while, including a book for Kids Can Press. So I, though, would like to return and do volume 3 because I love the anthology format, and this is a theme that, you know, we can tell hundreds of stories. So I would love to return and bring together a volume 3. It just might not be next year. Maybe it'll take a little longer. That's all. But I know that's not a straight enough answer yet for you, John. But,
Well, that sounds good.
Yeah,
Something to look forward to.
Yeah, exactly.
So as we wrap up here, I'd like each of you to talk a little bit about what you're up to next and where people can find you online to find out more about your next projects.
This is Derek. I'm in the process of editing my 4th novel right now, and people can find me at my Twitter or my website. They both have the same thing. It's just my name with no spaces. So Derek Künsken, DEREK KUNSKEN, and then if it's the website, it's .com, and if it's a Twitter, it's just got an @ there.
This is Mike. Like I say, I'm working with Romero Games on their upcoming game Empire of Sin, which is out on December 1st. Besides that, I'm putting the finishing touches with. I'd love to collaborate. I'd love to co-write where possible, so I'm putting the finishing touches on a first draft of a West of Ireland set science fiction feature film with a co-writer in London who's also from Ireland. I'm working on a supernatural TV pilot, also set in the West of Ireland, about a family of werewolves dealing with the patriarch of their family who has late stage dementia and is also a werewolf. I'm finding, generally speaking, that there's a lot of stuff coming up for me that's I'd like to do set in Ireland, which had always, I guess, been quite resistant to. Probably what had drawn me to North America was to try and tell stories set in North America, but now I'm back here. I'm quite excited to tell stuff that's set here. Yeah, and then besides that, kind of rolling with the punches, whatever comes.
And where can people find you online?
You can find me online at MikeHeneghan.com. That's MikeHeneghan.com.
How about you, Josh? What's up for you?
So I can be found kind of online. I do my best with social media, but I'm busy usually doing the Mayfair Theater side of things. So that's on Instagram, just at Mayfair Theater. And then my personal one is @batturtle_Mayfair. So I've got the next project coming up is the first issue is available for order right now in previews. And that's called Damn Cursed Children through Source Point Press, co-written with my friend Howard Wong, who Jack's also worked with. And that's a 5-issue horror miniseries. And so that's kind of what I'll be working on the next little while, just getting that out there. We're hoping to work on a sequel for that as well. A cool thing that I have out that's been online for a little bit is I wrote an episode of DC Superhero Girls, which is a super cool animated series. My episode's called #FlashForward/Flashback, and that you can just watch on YouTube. And I'm slowly working on getting a 4th issue of my Zomkies comic out, a locally produced horror anthology. The 4th issue is going to be an anthology, actually, by happenstance. So that'll be coming out sometime, hopefully in 2021 as well.
Sounds good. And Jack, you mentioned you've got a project coming up pretty soon?
So yeah, I've got a book coming out, a fantasy adventure middle grade book from Kids Can Press. Not waits a little bit though, not till 2023, but the book is well on its way. Being drawn right now, so I'm really excited about that. I think people will really love this story once it comes out. More details to come. I've also actually this year I've managed to complete a bunch of work around smaller short stories. Actually, I've done work for other anthologies. I'm doing a short story for Cloudscape Comics, actually, in their next anthology, and my story actually is a story about dementia. I'm looking forward to put that out in the world. That'll be out in 2021. I actually did my first audio drama, and that will be coming out soon. I'll send the details once that's out and ready to be out in the world. I expect that also to be in early 2021. Working on another short anthology piece for a Portuguese anthology series. Actually, Miguel Jorge invited me to contribute a story, so I'm doing a story for them. And I am also currently working on a work for hire superhero series for Chapter House Comics. So hope to announce details around that soon as well. So that's also a 2021 release. So other than that, pitching a whole bunch of other stuff too. So trying to keep as busy as I can.
Great. And where can people find you online?
So you can find me at my website, jackbriglio.com. That's JackBriglio.com. My website there, and I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram with the same name. Just together, no spaces. So yeah, you can find me there.
Thanks to Jack, Mike, Derek, and Josh for the chat. You can discover more about Jack on Twitter at Jack Briglio and online at jackbriglio.com. You can discover more about Mike on Twitter at Mike Heneghan and online at mikeheneghan.com. And you can discover more about Derek on Twitter at Derek Künsken and online at derekkunsken.com. And you can discover more about Josh on Twitter at Mayfair Theater and on Instagram at @batturtle_Mayfair. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts, and please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2020.